Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a framework that has pretty much shaped how we think about teaching and learning for decades, Bloom's taxonomy. It's this really powerful idea designed to push us all past just memorizing facts and, toward real, deep understanding.
Look, we've all been there, right? Cramming for a test, you ace it, and then the next day, it's all gone. So the real challenge for any teacher, or for any of us trying to learn something new, is this. How do we build a kind of thinking that actually sticks? That's the big question we're tackling today.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with where this whole framework came from, see how it changed over time, then we'll climb the 6 levels of thinking, figure out how to actually put it to work, and finally zoom out to look at the bigger picture.
All right, let's jump in.
Our story starts with a simple but honestly a revolutionary goal: to create a system for education that gets us all to move beyond just, spitting back facts on a test.
So back in the 1940s, this team of educators, led by a guy named Benjamin Bloom, they realized they had a big problem. Everybody was talking about educational goals, but it was like they were all speaking different languages. So they decided to create a common framework, a taxonomy, to get everyone on the same page about what it really means to learn.
But here's the thing about great ideas. They don't just sit on a shelf and collect dust. They evolve. And this evolution, from nouns to verbs, is totally key to understanding why this framework is so powerful today.
Now, what's so cool about this slide is you can literally see the change. On the left, you've got the original 1956 pyramid. See those words? Knowledge, comprehension? They're nouns, they're static things. But look on the right, at the 2001 version. It's remembering, understanding. They're verbs. This wasn't just some small grammar fix. It was a total reframing of learning as something you do. It's active, it's dynamic. So this revision, which came out in 2001, was actually led by one of Bloom's own students, Lauren Anderson, along with an original team member, David Krathwohl. They made 2 huge changes. First, that switch from nouns to verbs we just saw, and second, they shuffled the top levels. What they used to call synthesis, they renamed create, and they moved it to the very, very top of the pyramid. The result was a framework that's way more active and, frankly, just a better map of how we actually think.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, the 6 levels of thinking. The best way to picture it is like a ladder. You've got to have your feet firmly on one rung before you can reach for the next one.
So here they are, the 6 rungs on our cognitive ladder. And the whole idea is that you can't just skip ahead. You can't create something new if you haven't evaluated different ideas. And you can't evaluate if you haven't analyzed. See how it all builds? So, let's start at the very bottom and work our way up.
Okay, level 1, the foundation, remembering. This is just pure recall. It's not about what something means, it's just about pulling the information from your brain. Think of it like a flashcard. If you can list the state capitals or define a term, you're remembering.
The next step up is understanding. This is where you actually start to make sense of those facts. It's not just listing the facts, it's being able to explain an idea in your own words, it's being able to summarize a paragraph you just read. That's understanding.
Now we get to applying. This is where your knowledge turns into action. You're not just explaining the facts anymore, you're actually using them to do something. Like, if you use a mathematical formula to solve a new problem, you're applying your knowledge. Halfway up the ladder, we hit analyzing. This is where you start to break information down into its component parts to see how they all relate to each other. It's about drawing connections, comparing and contrasting, and seeing the underlying structure of something. You're basically deconstructing it to see how it ticks.
Almost to the top, we have evaluating. This level is all about making judgments and then being able to defend your position. It's about critiquing an argument or justifying a decision. You're not just taking information in, you're weighing it and forming an opinion based on clear criteria.
And finally, at the very peak, we have creating. This is the highest level of thinking. It's about taking everything you know, all the facts, your understanding, your analysis, and putting those elements together in a new way to produce something original. Whether that's designing a new product, writing a story, or composing a song, this is the pinnacle.
Okay, so we've climbed the ladder. It's a cool theory. But how do you actually use it? Well, let's get practical and talk about how this framework helps you write much more effective learning goals.
The process is actually pretty straightforward. First, you figure out your big picture goals. Then, you pick the right thinking levels from the ladder to get there. Step 3 is the secret sauce. You write your specific goals using those action verbs for each level. And then, crucially, you make sure your activities and your tests actually match up with those goals, and you check in and adjust as you go. And this chart here just illustrates it perfectly. Let's take a physics class. At the bottom, recite Newton's 3 laws. That's just remembering. Then, describe the laws in your own words. Now we're at understanding. Next, calculate the kinetic energy of a projectile. Bam, that's applying. Then you differentiate between potential and kinetic energy. That's analyzing. When you have to determine which principle is more appropriate, you're evaluating. And finally, when you can design an original homework problem, that's creating. You can just feel the thinking getting deeper and more complex at every single step.
Now, before we wrap up, it's really important to zoom out for a second. Because the framework we've been talking about, this whole cognitive ladder, is actually just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Turns out, Bloom's original group pictured learning in 3 big areas, or domains. The one we've been laser-focused on is the cognitive domain. That's all about thinking. But there's also the affective domain, which deals with our feelings, values, and attitudes. And then there's the psychomotor domain, which is all about physical skills, the doing. And a little fun fact, Bloom himself didn't actually work on the psychomotor part. Other researchers developed that framework later. So in the end, what's the real value of all this? It's this, right here. Bloom's taxonomy gives everyone, whether you're a teacher, a student, or a corporate trainer, a shared vocabulary. It makes sure that when we talk about a learning goal, we're all talking about the same thing, and we can line up what we teach with how we test it. It's all about clarity and alignment.
So, we'll leave you with this question. Now that you have this framework, this ladder for thinking, how are you going to use it? Whether you're teaching a class, learning a new skill, or training your team, how will you use it to climb past just remembering and start creating? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.